certain men. So prophethood is a status that certain men have because the prophets are men. There are no women prophets, and that's in no way disparaging women. Uh, Allah Ta'ala made it so only men were prophets. Only men were chosen for prophethood. So those men, since they're chosen to deliver the message from God, so they are equipped with special things that that um, establish and confirm their credibility. So even though the prophets are human men, but they have been purified and protected from the flaws of men that would tarnish their credibility, that would make them not trustworthy. So the prophets, they are built and they are made to be perfect examples of the human being. And so there is no moral stance against them, right? They have the perfect morality because they're prophets. And also, there is no physical stance against them because they are the most perfect physical beings. So there is no creation that is more perfect than a prophet because the prophets, they are the best of all creations. And so there is no creation that is better than a prophet. There is no creation that has a higher status than a prophet. And so then those prophets, they received revelation and they're obligated to pass on that information. So they're obligated to transmit and to convey the message that has been revealed to them. And so one half of that message is pertaining to the belief, and it's pertaining to what you're obligated to believe in as a human being, what you have to follow in terms of, for example, who we are as humans, that we're creations, we're weak. Um, we, we start off as something very small and then we develop, etc. And then we come out of the womb and we're helpless and if nobody takes care of us, then we will perish, etc. And how you have to learn how to walk, you have to learn how to talk, and then you have to work to get sustenance and to maintain yourself while you're living in this world. And then eventually if you make it to old age, to again become weak and helpless until you finally enter the grave. And then your body decomposes and then it becomes like dust. So to know that about ourselves, our identity, like who we are, that's part of the creed. We're not we are not parts of God. We ourselves are not God. We're not these some people, they have these like fantasies about human beings that they're supposedly genetically engineered by aliens and things like that, all types of weird stuff because of the ego of man, of the secular man. They want to aggrandize themselves, magnify themselves, make themselves seem bigger than they are. But as Muslims, we know what we are. And even the person who they look at things objectively. And the human experience is undeniable. So we should know who we are. We're not stardust, as they say. We are creations. We are, although we are, and our species, humankind, it's the best species because the prophets are humans. And so human beings were chosen to be the ones who, they have that honor because of Prophet Adam alayhi salam is the first human and the first prophet. So the human beings, they are a noble species because of Prophet Adam. He is the first human. So all of that information like that we need, for example, to know how to navigate this world, and it comes from the prophets. So the prophets, they tell us what's the correct creed. Um, that we have to believe that the universe has a beginning and that therefore the universe has a creator, and that creator, he's unlike the universe in any way, because if he were like the universe, then he wouldn't be able to create anything. But the universe is here, so we know that the creator exists. So God is not a man, God is not a spirit, God is not a light. No, God is not a physical entity. Um, he is inconceivable, kind of using the rational mind, meaning that the mind judges that something that has no beginning and therefore existed eternally before time and place and light and darkness and directions and shapes and colors, that you can't imagine that, because all you're able to imagine is shapes and colors and something that has a size and something that has physical properties. So that's the creed that the prophets came with, all of them. That's the creed of Islam. The second thing, because we said that the information that the prophets came with can be like divided in two. The first is the creed, and the second is the law. So this part, the law, it directly pertains to the day-to-day of the human being. So there's nothing left out about the human being's life, any aspect of the human being's life. Nothing is left out, meaning there is a judgment in the revealed law for each and every part, for each and every aspect of the human being's life. And so here also, and we see, this is a key, this is a sign, this is something that it tells us, it tells us something. And then of course, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and what the prophets, what they taught the people, it it goes together with this, or they explicitly mentioned it, which is that law. If us as human beings, as humanity, right? If we look at, let's say, humanity as a whole, or like as one big community, if humanity implemented the law revealed by the creator of the universe, right, who knows everything and who knows what's best for the human being, then the world would be a better place. If everyone implemented the law revealed by the creator of the universe, by God, the world would be a better place. And of course, we know that any even when there even when there would be a prophet walking the earth and teaching people the law, still there were people who completely disregarded the law. There were tyrants, there were pharaohs, there were unjust kings, there were, mobs and secret societies and, agents of the devil, people that, they're opposed to the prophets. So it's like, so the prophets, they are the ones who receive the revelation and have been ordered to transmit it. So they are conveying the message that God is revealing to the people. And then there's the other side, right? The opposing side, which is the devil and those who follow him. But see, us in Islam, it's different than in Christianity. So in Christianity, they put God and the devil like side by side, and so they in Christianity they give the devil like almost the same status, like that he can create and he can stop God's will and things like that. So that's completely wrong. That's blasphemous. Yani that is disbelief, and whoever thinks that or believes that, they are not a Muslim and they're outside of Islam. But in Islam, and we have it the right way, the correct way, which is that God is the creator of the universe. He has the ultimate authority and supremacy. His will is always done. Nothing happens against his will. Um, God is the creator of both good and evil, and he rewards the good and orders with the good, and he forbids the evil, and he does not accept the evil. So, and someone might ask, well, what's the wisdom behind that? It's very simple. So that it becomes manifest to us, and who are those that obey God and who are those that do not obey God. So that when everything is finished and it's judgment day and those people that did evil are going to hell, that we know why. We know why they're going to hell because we've seen what they done. We've seen what they did. Let's say the murderer, the one who goes and like murders another person unjustly, the serial killer. He knows what he did, yani, because he experienced it, and the victim also knows what he did because they experienced it. So that will be a witness, a testimony against those people on Judgment Day. And so when they're thrown into hell, and when they go to hell, they cannot say, you didn't give us a chance. If we had lived on this earth and we got the message, then we would have obeyed, we would have followed. So that argument is essentially cut off. So that's the wisdom behind that. We're not like the secularists who they try to blame God for the evil things that men do. Those who do the actions with their own hands, they're accountable. That's the whole thing about accountability. Here in this world, we have a certain type of will as creation, meaning we want to do something and we direct our actions towards that thing. And then if it takes place, then we know that that was our destiny, that God willed for that to occur. And if it doesn't take place, then we know it wasn't our destiny and God willed for that thing not to occur. But we're not robots. We're not forced to do what is the right decision. So when the human has a decision to make and he makes the right decision, that is because that human they did it with their own will. Yani they uh, directed their heart and their action towards the right decision. And if the human makes the wrong decision, meaning something sinful, something prohibited, then that's also by his own will, meaning that he directed his heart towards that action and he did it. So God doesn't force the human to do what's right. So in that sense, the human being has a choice, meaning essentially his action is attributed to him. The human being, his action is attributed to him. He's not like a robot that has no will. And so this is so that when the people are judged on Judgment Day, everything, and it's witnessed, it's documented. This is what you did. So that second part is yani the second half of that information that we get from the prophets is related to that. So we as human beings, we have to follow the law. And so I'm giving that introduction because it's very important for the Muslim to really have that firm confidence that our law is in no place to be criticized. There's no place to criticize our law. Because some of the things, for example, that the non-Muslims do is that um, they try to use a psychological tactic against the Muslim to make the Muslim feel like he has to be on the defense. Like, oh, look what it says in your religion. If someone fornicates, then they're stoned to death. That's what the non-Muslim says. Oh, look what it says in your religion. If someone steals, then they cut off his hand. Oh, look what it says in your religion that such and such thing is forbidden, like sodomy, for example. Because right now, the sodomites, um, they're on the rise, and they might have a big rise, a bigger rise if certain things happen this year. But that's just the dunya, and we're living in the final days. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he informed his nation that these things would happen. But in conversation, right? As a Muslim, of course, you're living in society, you're living in this world, you're not existing in a vacuum, you're interacting with non-Muslims, they see you, they know your name is Ahmad, they know your name is Muhammad, they know, for example, if you're a sister, you're wearing the hijab. So of course, the non-Muslims, they pass judgment. Those that, for example, have been poisoned by propaganda, they're looking at you like a terrorist. They're looking at you like, you're with the Taliban, or you're with ISIS, or you're with this, or you're with that, and you cut off people's hands and you stone people to death. That's what when they're looking at you. The ones who are more educated, the ones who actually looked into al-Islam, then they would look at you and they would say, "Oh, that's not one of the extremists." And what they mean by that, what they mean by extremists, is a Muslim who actually follows the law. Now, in terms of the law, and this is something that you should know as well, you can use it when you're having your conversation, is that when there is no official Islamic infrastructure, when the Muslim government is not in place, when there is no caliph, then these religious penalties, we're not allowed ourselves as laymen to carry them out. So we're not. So if someone steals, for example, let's say in America, someone steals in America, right? Let's say I'm a owner of a shop, I sell halal things, and let's say that somebody comes in and steals, and I'm able to like catch him, right? I'm not gonna take him into the back room and chop off his hand. No, I'm not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that, right? If a Muslim steals from us and etc., we're not gonna chop off his hand in the back room. No, we're not gonna do that because the Muslim government, yani the infrastructure that is necessary to be in place in order for these penalties, religious punishments to be carried out, is not in place. It's that simple. But in terms of, is that the correct judgment? Is that the right law? And is that exactly what should happen? Then yes, we say as Muslims, that's exactly what should happen. And through the process of the Islamic law. And it is a just process. And it's better than any so-called justice system that exists here or exists in the West. So we talked about last time the prohibition of fornication and sodomy, and we explained all that, and we explained the difference between a muhsan and a non-muhsan. We explained that if someone is muhsan, which means that they've had um, sexual intercourse at least one time within a valid marriage, that those people, if they are convicted of fornication, they would be stoned to death with mid-sized stones. And we explain how that process goes. They'll be buried up to their waist, and sometimes like covered with a sheet, and then they are pelted with mid-sized stones until they die. And then we said that the Muslim who goes through that, he's purified from that sin, and in the hereafter, he won't be questioned about the fornication. He would have paid for that in this world, and that is much less painful than going to hell. That's number one. Number two is that the way that someone would be convicted of fornication is one of two ways, and there is no third way. It's only one of two ways. There's only two ways that a Muslim would be convicted of fornication, and if he is muhsan, if he's had sexual intercourse at least one time within a valid marriage before, then he's the only one that would be stoned to death. As for the one who is not muhsan, the one who's never had sexual intercourse within a valid marriage, so that one he is not stoned to death. That one he is exiled for 1 year, and he receives 100 lashes if he's free. If he's a slave, then 50 lashes, half of that. But so there's only one of two ways to convict someone of fornication. The first way is by that person's own confession in front of the Muslim judge. If he confesses in front of the Muslim judge and he gives a detailed confession, he doesn't just say, I fornicated. That's not enough. He has to actually, literally define the fornication. So he has to say, for example, I penetrated this forbidden private part, etc. So that the Muslim judge then, once he hears the confession, then he convicts him, and then the religious penalty would be enacted on him. But if at any point in time that one who confessed, if he changes his mind and he doesn't want to go through with it, he can retract his confession. And if he retracts his confession, then they leave him alone. They do not enact the religious penalty. So once you know this information, you see that all the uproar that the non-Muslims are having about stoning people to death is really, um, it's really not in its place. It's really not in its place. Because what's the other way for the person to be convicted is if one, two, three, four trustworthy male Muslims witness the actual act of fornication. Not that they witness two people going into a house together, not that they witness two people under the same sheet, right? Even that is not enough. They have to witness the actual penetration, for example. And all four of them have to witness it, and all four of them have to testify. So if one of them, if, let's say three of them testify, and one of them says, I'm not sure, I don't know, then the the uh the conviction will not occur. And what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he told us is that whoever shows us their sins, then we apply the Islamic law upon them. But the Muslim, he should not expose his sins, and he should repent. So he should repent. The Muslim shouldn't, yeah, he's not encouraged to go and confess in front of the Muslim judge. But if he does, the Muslim judge is going to act upon the Islamic law. But the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is don't go and confess, rather repent. So again, we see the greatness of Al-Islam. And then the second scenario, how likely would it be that four trustworthy male Muslims would somehow witness that act? How? There's a very, 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 very any specific situation. And if it does occur, then the law would be enacted. So there's no argument here for the non-Muslim. The non-Muslim, he can't say, oh, this is wrong, this is bad. He can't say it. He can't say it. Because he what is he judging by? Why is he saying it's wrong? just because he likes to fornicate. So they don't have any like rational basis to be against it. That's just their preferences that we shouldn't do that to people who fornicate. Their preferences, yeah, let everybody fornicate and do what they want. Na'udhu billah. And that's why we see the decay of society today. There's no doubt about it. In 2024, we've seen it. Many people have seen it. Now, we've seen it like a long time ago, where we're talking pre 9/11. You've seen that. Just now in 2024, people are catching up. What uh, a small, let's say, percentage of people, what they, for example, were aware of, let's say, over 20 years ago, even in the mid 90s, late 90s, people are just starting to find out about it now. People are just trying to are just now they're getting the information. And so this is mostly due to the internet. Because like in the late 90s and in like the mid 90s, it wasn't as developed, so and it wasn't as fast basically. So you wouldn't have access to lots of information so fast. And so back then the person you would have to like read yourself, go and read books or like read documents or like go and research like stuff that people consider to be boring, like it's like you're studying for a history test for your college exam. It's like you're seeing dates, you're seeing numbers, you're seeing statistics, you're seeing like first hand reports, etc. That's people that's not entertaining for some people, and it is very interesting. But so the decay of society is clear for everyone now. So alhamdulillah for the laws of Islam. Any Muslim who, let's say, um, goes against or contradicts um, or thinks that something that is wrong or something that shouldn't be done or that something else is better, they exit from Islam. So here we have a question. It says, if a person thought or felt a way about the rules of the religion, is it okay to say to them that Islam is not based off what you feel? Islam is not based off what you feel, you think, or should be right. Of course, that's basically what we're saying. And here's a very nice, precise, short way of saying it that's very impactful. If someone says, I don't think this is right, or I don't think that this Islamic law should be this way, I think it should be another way. The simple way to refute them is to say, by what standard? And by what scale? By what metrics are you measuring this? Based off what are you saying that? And that's a rhetorical question. You're not really asking them to tell you, for example, what they're basing it off of. It's a rhetorical question, meaning we know what it's based off of. It's just your preference. It's just your opinion. It's just how you feel. But you're not basing it off anything rational or evidence. Like, where do you get that from? Who told you that it shouldn't be this way? Who told you? And so for us, our answer to who told you is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is superior, and as a creation, than anyone that they bring. Any person that they bring that, let's say, they got their idea from, they would be dwarfed by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he's a prophet and he's the best of them. So it doesn't. There's no comparison. Meaning, let's say the non-Muslim, he brings, some secular, some talking head in a suit or whatever, right? Some corrupt, vile, wicked person, and they're the ones that are saying, "Oh no, this is wrong because of that and this and that." And we say, "Well, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's better than you, right? He's chosen by God. He said this." And basically, he didn't make it up himself. He's just conveying the message. We believe about him that he's conveying the message from God. So essentially, that secular, talking head in a suit, the vile, wicked individual, he's basically saying, my opinion is going against God's judgment. I'm saying that what God judged is wrong and that it shouldn't be. And so, of course, that makes them wrong. So the Muslim should always stand tall when it comes to al-Islam. He never should shy away because all these other people, they're in no position. They have no moral high ground. You know, they just look at their history and look at what they've done and look at what they believe and look at the atrocities that they commit. They're in no place to point the finger at us. We follow Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Period. So continuing on, among the sins of the hand, among the sins of the private parts is bestiality, even if they are one's own property. Subhanallah, there are some people that they have intercourse with animals. This is known, and that it happens, especially people that have livestock, that they have sheep or that they have cows. Some of them they do that disgusting thing with the animal. This is forbidden. It is forbidden, and even if those animals are theirs, so that's subhanallah. Among the sins of the private parts, and of course, it's an enormous sin. And among the sins of the private parts is to masturbate by the hand of other than the man's wife or female slave who is lawful to him. So when they say masturbate, they're referring to um, making the person making themselves ejaculate. So whether it were like with their hand or with an inanimate object or and whatever it is, except for his wife, right? So usually it's the hand, but or any other part of her body. Like let's say he just rubbed up on her thigh, let's say, without penetrating, so that he can relieve himself. So that's permissible. He can do that with his wife or his female slave who is lawful to him, meaning it's not a female slave who's married to another slave, or there's certain cases in which if the Muslim owns a female slave that he cannot have intercourse with her. He cannot use her as a concubine. So not every female slave is a concubine. Some female slaves cannot be used as concubines because let's say they're married. So you cannot, but if she is, and if she's not married and she is not, let's say, owned by another slave owner, if it's his female slave and she's not married, then it is allowed for him to use her as a concubine, to have intercourse with her, because she is his property. Right? That's what it means to be a slave. It means you're owned by another person, meaning that you can be bought, you can be sold, you can be, let's say, uh, yeah. There's certain rules that apply to the slave, and inshallah, if we ever go over a book in the Islamic law, there's a chapter specifically for that, like how to treat the slave, etc. Um, how to, for example, you have to give them food, clothing, and shelter that is befitting, and from the same thing that the slave master would eat, and from the same thing that the slave master would, let's say, sleep in, and the same thing that the slave master would wear, and the slave gets those things. The slave master has to provide those things, and he cannot overwork them, and he cannot abuse them, and he can't you know uh torture them, like how the white Americans and the Europeans, and how they treated their slaves. And of course, in Islam, that's not how slavery goes. There's a question here. It says, in this current day, can men have a concubine, or is it abolished? No, it's not. It's not abolished in the sense of that it's no longer part of the Islamic law. It's still, and it remains the Islamic law. And the judgment is still the same. The judgment still remains. But what I think you mean is, are there people that can, let's say, in a valid way, be slaves, and then so he would have a concubine? I personally have not um, seen or met someone who their judgment is of a slave, that they have the judgment of a slave. I've never met someone like that, but I have heard that they still exist. I've heard that in Mauritania, there's still some people that they have like the Islamic judgment of a slave. But again, slavery in Islam is not like the imperialistic Western slavery. What the non-Muslims did to the people that they unjustly took from Africa. Many of them, they're free men that were, let's say, that they were tricked and that they were not slaves at all, and then they were just like forcibly taken. Yani not through a war or a battle. They were just like tricked. So, and then things that they did to them, like they would torture them and they would overwork them and they would give them like animal food, and they treated them like as subhuman. So that in Islam is wrong. That's um that's something that it cannot happen in Islam. It's not permissible to treat the slave like that. You cannot treat the slave like that. طيب, then it says to copulate during menstrual or postpartum bleeding or after it has stopped, but before the obligatory whole body wash has been performed or was performed without the intention or without one of its requirements. So in the Islamic law, it's forbidden for the husband and the wife to engage in sexual intercourse, meaning the vaginal penetration, while she's on her period. So when she's on her period, he's not allowed to penetrate her, like even if she wants it, and she's not allowed to enable him to penetrate her, even if he wants it. So it's because it's forbidden. So, and even if they both want it, then it's still not permissible. And the same judgment applies to postpartum bleeding, which is a certain type of bleeding that happens after the woman gives birth. It's the same as the period. So usually the postpartum bleeding, the average lasts about 40 days, but it can go as long as 60 days is the maximum. So during that whole entire time, he cannot have sexual intercourse with her, yani meaning penetration. Or let's say the bleeding has stopped, right? So now she's not bleeding anymore. Her period is over, but she has not performed the obligatory bath, which is the purificatory bath that the Muslim is obligated to do so that he can pray and so he can do other things after, let's say, she finishes her period or her postpartum bleeding. So let's say she stopped bleeding, but before she took that obligatory bath, they wanted to have intercourse. They cannot. It's unlawful. They have to wait until after she performs the bath. So let's say she performs the bath, but she did it wrong. So she didn't satisfy one of the conditions or one of the requirements, or she didn't have the intention. So it would still be forbidden to copulate in that scenario. Then the author said to uncover one's awrah in view of those who are prohibited from looking at it, or to uncover one's awrah while alone without a need. So here what it's referring to is the unlawful nakedness. So what is the awrah? It's the unlawful nakedness. And so there are two categories for this. One category is what you're obligated to cover when you're in public, and what you're obligated to conceal of your body while you're in public, in view of those who are prohibited from looking at it, and what you're obligated to conceal when you're alone, when there's nobody else around. So for the man, we'll start with the man. For the man, if he goes in front of people who are prohibited from looking at him, he has to make sure to conceal what is between the navel and the knees. So if the man, let's say, goes out without a shirt, but he has, let's say, like something wrapped around his waist that goes like an izar, that goes from his belly button down to, let's say, his shins. But then he walks outside, like, let's say, with his upper chest showing, his arm showing, etc. That's not forbidden. So the man, he can do that, but it's not encouraged. So Islamically, modesty is the ideal. So the man should also, conceal that part of his body, even though he's not obligated to. And in private, the man is obligated to cover what is between the navel and the knees. So if he's alone, I'm sorry, if he's alone, then what he has to cover is his private parts. So if the man is alone, he has to cover his private parts. So uh, if he's alone, or yeah, if and who's the one that can see every part of the other person is the spouse. So if you're in front of your spouse, you don't have to cover anything. Now for the woman, when she is in view of those who are forbidden to look at her, she has to conceal her entire body except her face and her hands. So she's not obligated to cover her face. I know that there's extremists out there that they claim that the woman, she has to cover her face in public, but she doesn't. So as long as the woman conceals her entire body, that is the color of her skin with fabric or material, and even if it was, let's say, not loose fitting, right? Because of the extremists, they also say that it's forbidden for the woman to wear, let's say, tight clothing, but it's not. As long as her skin is concealed, then that means her body is concealed. So she has to conceal her entire body except her face and her hands with some sort of fabric. So it can't be see-through. It can't be like, with like a bunch of holes in it, like some fish net or something like that. It has to be, and it can't be transparent. It has to be something that conceals the color of her skin. Um, that's in public. And in private, the woman, she is obligated to cover what is between her navel and her knees in private. So that is the amount of her body that she's obligated um, to conceal when she's in private is what's between her navel and her knees. Um, and so that would be and if someone uncovers their lawful nakedness in front of people, they would um, they would be sinful. So, sorry, for the woman, the unlawful nakedness that she has to cover up is any her private parts. If there are, let's say, if she's in front of other women, then she's has to cover what's between her navel and her knees. So that is, and it's a summary of what we've mentioned before, because we covered that um, in the previous chapter. Um, Now, keep in mind that for the man, there are other imams that say that in public that he only has to cover his private parts. So if the man, let's say, shows his thigh in public, according to some imams, it's not sinful. And according to some imams, he's allowed to do that, but it's not recommended. Rather, he has to, he should at least cover that because it's in line with the ideal of modesty. Um, and the last one that we'll mention is to face the qibla or turn one's back to it while urinating or defecating without a barrier, or when the barrier is more than 3 cubits away or less than 2/3 of a cubit high, unless it is in a place prepared for this, that is for urinating or defecating, like a bathroom. So basically, if you're in an open land, like in the forest or in the desert, and you need to use the bathroom, you have to make sure that you're not facing the qibla or turning your back to it if you don't have anything around you to use as a barrier. That barrier has to be at least 2/3 of a cubit high, and the cubit, or I believe 1 cubit is 18 inches. And it can't be more than 3 cubits away. So it has to be within 3 cubits distance, 3 cubits or less. And also just to clarify, for the unlawful nakedness, if you're alone, um, yeah, and you have to cover your private parts, um, you have to cover your private parts, unless you have a need. Like if you're changing your clothes, or if you're about to go into the shower, or if um want to cool off, like if it's very hot and you want to cool off, then you're allowed to be completely naked when you're by yourself. But without a need, it's forbidden just to be completely naked when you're by yourself. Um, so for facing the Qibla, let's say that you're using the bathroom, you're inside of a room that's made for um, using the bathroom. So in that case, what happens? In that case, it doesn't matter which direction you're facing, because you're using the bathroom. You're in the room that is made for that. So it doesn't matter if you're facing north, south, east, or west. And we'll mention this last one, to defecate on the grave. It's forbidden to defecate on the grave, and that's among the sins of the private parts, is to defecate on the grave. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam specifically forbade that. But just like, let's say, sitting on a grave, that's not forbidden. And the meaning of the hadith isn't just basic sitting. It just means like defecating on the grave. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Uh, we have a question here. It says, does saying the Basmala, which is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, protect one from the unseen while naked? Yeah, there's a certain dhikr that is said before you remove your clothing that would prevent the jinn from seeing your nakedness. Uh, from what I recall, is Bismillahi alladhi la ilaha illahu, but I'll double check it. The Basmala is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Are there any other questions about anything? Alrighty. If anyone here would like to be added to a blast list to receive updates and links and other content, then you can message in the chat privately, and we'll add you to the blast group, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم